at the beginning of the show, we were talking about that article that I'd written about the Senate parliamentarian for Jacobin. It's really not that hard, just ignore the Senate parliamentarian. And there was a point where, as an analogy, I talked about Harry Frankfurt. So this, the way it ties into the Senate parliamentarian, you could go read the article after you're done. But in that particular, let's get the graphic back up again. So in that particular passage, here's what I say. The great 20th century philosopher Harry Frankfurt has a classic example to test our intuitions about free will and determinism. If there's only one possible thing that will happen, does that mean we aren't responsible for our actions? Frankfurt asks us to imagine that a man named Jones is preparing to make a decision. A villain named Black is prepared to intervene to manipulate Jones into doing what Black wants him to do. Perhaps he'll hypnotize Jones. Perhaps he'll use some science fiction device that will alter the chemistry in Jones's brain. Depending on how you fill out the details, you get one of many variations of what philosophers call Frankfurt cases.
Brain chip.
Pretty sure this is the first time the phrase Frankfurt cases has appeared in Jacobin.
Brain chip.
Yeah, maybe he puts a chip in his brain that he can activate to take over Jones's brain if he needs to. But here's the twist.
Ooh, a twist. Black will only intervene. Excuse me. Black will only intervene if he doesn't think Jones will do what Black wants him to do on his own.
So if Black intervenes and somehow makes Jones do what Black wants him to do, we'd all agree that this would be Jones's
would not
be Jones's fault, right? We'd all agree this would not be Jones's fault. It would be Black's fault.
Yes.
Wouldn't be Jones's
But
fault.
that's not the issue at hand.
But if Jones does what Black wants him to do because it's also what Jones wants to do, in that case, Frankfurt thinks it's clearly Jones's fault.
Yes. So Jones is considering whether or not he should kill Smith, and so Black has got this. Where was I going with this? Black has implanted this brain chip where if Jones doesn't kill Smith, Black's going to push the button and Jones will then kill Smith. But if Jones just kills Smith on his own and Black is, how Frankfurt says, lurking in the background, but he never has to be involved, then we do think that that's Jones's fault.
Yeah. So if Jones says, I had no choice, Black would have made me do it anyway, Frankfurt thinks no one should be impressed by this excuse.
I'm not impressed. Are you impressed, Ben?
Nope.
No.
Nope. I am unimpressed. So the fact that Black hypothetically would have forced him if he hadn't wanted to do it doesn't matter. Jones is at fault. So that's the passage. Right. That's the passage from the article. And
so the idea is that Jones was going to kill Smith no matter what. There was nothing else that could happen other than Jones killing Smith. But we don't think that just that fact automatically removes any sort of moral responsibility from Jones. Yeah.
So I think that Jay Hutch talks too much, says, I think Ben is secretly impressed. It's worth taking a step back. And actually, the conversation with Vivek ended up being even more relevant to this than I would have hoped, because he spent so much time talking about individual agency, and it's not just that a structure is just somehow forcing somebody to do something, but that that they're making decisions on their own. And so the fancy way of thinking about this is whether free will is compatible with determinism. And that's where Frankfurt is ultimately going. He doesn't quite spell it out in the essay, but that's where he's ultimately going. So, Dr. Burgis.
Yes.
What is determinism? What does that mean in this context?
Determinism is the idea that everything that happens is caused by the things that happened previously. So Z is caused by Y, and Y is caused by X, and so on and so on. So that if you were to place yourself somehow at the beginning of time and you knew all the rules of the universe, you could predict everything going forward because things could only go one way. Given the state of the universe and the laws of the universe, there's only one way that things can play out.
Yeah. And so, the idea is that if you think about, like, if you ever took a physics class where there were word problems, like not, just like a basic, like high school kind of physics class, and, you have
if you were lucky enough to have physics classes in your high school, which I was not.
Sure. But if you were, or if you took it as a college, sophomore or something, then, and, they'd have these word problems like the baseball is going at such and such, miles an hour. And
is this like the train? This train is leaving Boston and this train is leaving Los Angeles. When will they collide? Kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And so, and you have all these things about force and mass and acceleration. And the idea is if you know the initial conditions and, you can plug them into your equations, and then you can just pop out what's going to happen.
There would be one spot and only one spot where the two trains will collide.
And it's fun, too, to introduce in terms of this because it sort of sounds like there's a tie into the trolley problem, they're colliding trains. But in any case, so determinism is just the claim that, the more we learn about science, the more it seems like more things work like this. That it's never that, there's like less and less that we can explain in terms of deterministic chains of cause and effect. It's always there's more and more, and there's some reason to think, well, maybe this is, just true of everything all the time. And what's going on in human brains when a person makes a decision is not a special magical exception to
it
these.
Is that the brain is a physical thing, just like those two trains are.
Yeah. So the
no.
So and even if you think, okay, maybe know a little bit about quantum physics, and there are some interpretations of quantum physics where you get down to the level of itty bitty, smaller than atom, subatomic particles. It's not entirely deterministic. The laws that govern their behavior are just probabilistic, but it's not clear that that's going to help much.
No.
Or be very different, for our purposes, because it's not clear that that's going to filter up to the level of like human decisions and human actions.
No.
And even if it did,
that has its own problems.
So just assuming determinism, though, for the sake of simplicity, that's what
Let's do that.
Seems like a good plan. So then the question that philosophers are going to argue about isn't is determinism true or not, because that's a job for the physicist.
That's not my problem.
That's
their problem.
It's going to be if determinism is true, does that mean that we don't really have free will? And to kind of see how the Frankfurt argument is supposed to tie into this, we can think about a really, I think, one of the most obvious arguments you could make for saying no. If determinism is true, we cannot have free will. They are incompatible. So this argument goes like this. J. Andrew World made some snazzy graphics to illustrate it. Premise one, if determinism is true, we aren't free to do otherwise. So what does that mean?
It's like the trains. If everything is following along with the laws of nature, the trains cannot collide in Kansas City if they are destined, let's say, to collide in what's another city then? Las Vegas.
Those are the two cities.
Those are the two possible cities. No, that only one thing is possible to happen. And that if we are just, physical beings like that, then the same laws of nature act on us and only one thing will happen. There's only going to be one course of events.
So if there's only one decision that you could have made, the same way that the trains could only collide in Kansas City was the one they are going to collide in?
Yes. Okay.
Not Las Vegas. So the trains can't collide in Las Vegas. The trains are going to collide in Kansas City.
They are not free to do otherwise.
Yeah. they're not free to collide somewhere other than Kansas City.
That's right.
There's only one possibility. And similarly, if the idea would be if determinism is true, we aren't free to the synapses in our brain can't collide somewhere else than the decision that we make. So we're not free in the sense that we could do something else.
That's right. Your synapses are going to collide in Kansas City, and there's nothing else that could possibly happen.
And some people who say, yes, even if determinism is true, we can still have free will, have tried to fight this point and say, no, if we define free to do otherwise just the right way.
Yeah. If we can get these definitions, set up just the way we want them, then we can get the conclusion that we want.
And even a lot of people who are sympathetic to some form of compatibilism, the idea that there's some sense in which free will and determinism are compatible, have kind of decided over the decades that this maybe isn't the way to go, that like you just kind of gotta accept premise one.
You must accept it. This is something my mother-in-law likes to say. You must accept it. Shout out Kathy.
That makes her sound so bad. She didn't say that about either of us, but she said that in another context, that someone must accept it.
Yeah, so now she likes to just say it in general. And now she does say it to us. You must accept it.
You must accept it.
Yeah.
So that's the first premise of this argument: free will and determinism aren't compatible. Second premise two, if we aren't free to do otherwise, we aren't in control of our actions in the right way to be morally responsible for those actions. So intuitively, it only makes sense to say that something's your fault if you could have done something different.
Right. If someone hypnotizes you to shoot someone, then once you do shoot someone, you can, well, I wasn't free to do otherwise, and it doesn't seem like you're responsible for that because it wasn't your choice. You were constrained in a way where that was the only thing you could do.
So putting these two premises together, remember the first one was if determinism is true, we aren't free to do otherwise. Second one is if we aren't free to do otherwise, we aren't in control of our actions, the right way to be morally responsible for those actions. We end up at the conclusion. If determinism is true, we aren't in control of our actions in the right way to be morally responsible for those actions. So
that was an excellent argument, Ben.
Yeah, so this is the argument that Frankfurt's responding to. And
Yes.
Anytime you see an argument for a conclusion that you're not sure whether you accept or not, there are at least two questions you should ask yourself about that argument. So one of them is, does the conclusion follow from the premises? There was a guy named Ed Irwin, who was a professor when we went to grad school, as as an older gentleman, kind of intense.
He was an old guy.
and sort of little tint of New York in his syllables. And so it was very memorable the way he would say, as I heard him say many times, that doesn't follow, like some premises could be true without the conclusion being true. That doesn't follow. I think I remember joking once, should be the title of his memoirs, that doesn't follow the Ed Irwin story. In any case, so the first question is, does the conclusion follow from the premises? So does it?
It seems to.
Yeah, it sure does, right? Because that's saying if A is true, B is true. If B is true, C is true. So if A is true, C is true. That's
what we call a hypothetical syllogism.
Nice. See, you're learning some fancy terminology here. I like it.
We just teach all sorts of things.
So then the second question is, are the premises true? And so if, like Frankfurt, you don't think the conclusion is true, and you acknowledge that if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true,
you have to find a way to make at least one of those premises false.
Yeah. So he could try to say, well, if we define free to do otherwise in just the right way, we can see a way in which,
this is the compatibilist way. If we if we what is the word I'm looking for? If we do this to these,
if we like fiddle,
if we massage these definitions enough, we can fit them into my personal argument.
Yeah, so this is classical compatibilism. Classical compatibilism says that if we think hard enough about what it means, say that we're free to do otherwise, we can see that actually premise one isn't right. Now, all joking aside, I'm slightly less unsympathetic than Jen is to that classical compatibilism.
Well, if you think hard enough, just means if you think about it until you come to my way of thinking, until you come to my viewpoint. And if you haven't, you just haven't thought hard enough about it yet. That's what that means.
Yeah. So again, I think that there might be a more charitable way to understand this, but we've only got so much time. This is YouTube. Let's just be uncharitable for a minute.
We did do a Philosophy Friday on this with Ryan Lake.
We did.
There is that floating around on the internet somewhere.
Yeah. So if it's before the ones that were lost, you could go.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. So it probably is before the ones that were lost. So you could actually, there is a video of me and Jen arguing about this exact point
with Ryan.
Yes, with Ryan. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that Jen and Harry Frankfurt are right, and this is not a promising way to go. So then his only remaining options are to accept the conclusion, which, spoiler, he does not do, or to do what?
To do what, Ben?
Gonna just
start massaging definitions?
No. So massaging definitions would presumably be the reject premise one option, but what Frankfurt's going to do is reject premise two. Frankfurt.
Yeah, that's so much more boring.
Frankfurt's going to say we could make, even though maybe normally they line up, actually being free in the sense of being free to do otherwise, that I did this, but I could have done that. Maybe actually that's just a different thing, one that usually lines up but doesn't have to. That's just a different thing than being free in the sense that you're in control of your actions, so that if you do something bad, it's your fault. And if you do something good, you deserve credit for it. And he thinks that there's a way that those come apart, and his way of showing that he thinks those come apart is exactly that passage that we
all love Ryan Lake.
That we started with. Ryan is going to be back on the show. I'm trying to remember, sometime in October.
Ryan got his booster shot yesterday.
Yeah.
So yay, Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan is triple vaccinated. He's much stronger than us double vaccinated people. At this point, he's like a day walker in Blade. The vampire could walk out in the sunshine. All the other vampires have to stay inside.
That's one way to look at it.
He could just triple vaccinated. He can lick doorknobs. He can. Like without worried about getting COVID, he can do whatever. He's
That might not be the only reason to not lick doorknobs.
He's ascended to to a different level.
I hope he watches this.
Dara says we're only free because we can't know the future. I think everybody in this discussion would agree that wouldn't be enough to count as freedom. In other words, if you're not really in control of your actions, but you think you are, then maybe that's more pleasant for you psychologically, but that's not freedom. I mean, if go back to the brain chip, that if there was the chip in your brain that controlled your actions, but you didn't know that the chip was there. Perhaps the first thing the chip does is it wipes out your memory of finding out that you had brain surgery. So you don't know the chip is there. So your actions are, So the mad scientist is pressing buttons, now Ben will decide to have another sip of beer. And I think, I just made a free decision. Well, I don't know that it's unfree, but that's not enough. Like, that's not enough to make it objectively free. And Frankfurt wants to say, no, at least in that second sense, that you're in control enough for it to be your fault. At least in that second sense, we could be objectively free, even if determinism is true. Well, how does he do this? By saying, look at these cases about Jones and Black, where Black would intervene. He would, press the button to activate the brain chip or whatever, if he thought he had to, if he thought that Jones wasn't just going to do it.
He doesn't want to get involved if he doesn't have to. He would prefer that Jones do it on his own if he wow. This is also distracting. He would prefer to do it. He would prefer that Jones do it on his own. But if he has to step in, he will.
Yeah. So if if it looks, if he's just trying to get Jones to, there's like, I don't know, mash it together with the trolley problem. Jones is trying to decide whether to pull the lever, and if it looks like he's going to pull the lever on his own, Black won't press the button because he has no reason to. But if it looks like Jones is a Kantian and he's not going to pull the lever, he thinks that would be wrong to sacrifice some people for others, then
you were throwing together so many philosophical concepts right now.
Yeah, see, it's like all the ingredients in the nachos Belgrande. So
hot.
So anyway, ignoring that, but if it looks like Jones isn't going to pull the lever on his own, Black will push the button. Well, in the scenario where Black didn't have to push the button, where the fact that Jones had this chip that could have been activated played no role whatsoever in the chain of cause and effect that led to Jones pulling the lever, then once Jones is, since the way this would play out in the real world, Jones is eventually going to go on trial for killing that guy with the trolley. So if his defense attorneys trot out actually there was this chip in his head, and see, there was this guy Black. So you see, even if Jones hadn't wanted to pull the lever, he would have ended up doing it anyway. Frankfurt thinks the jury is going to be very unimpressed by that because Jones didn't do it because of the chip. Jones did it because Jones wanted to do it.
Yeah, they could bring Black up there. Black, did you push the button? Nope. Well, Black's kind of irrelevant now, isn't he?
Yeah.
So just because Jones was gonna pull that lever, there was no way around Jones pulling that lever, we still think that he carries responsibility for that.
Now, is this a completely convincing argument? You can watch that live stream from a while back with us and the extremely powerful triple vax Ryan Lake.
Somebody said I got very heated with Ryan.
And watch us all have a big heated discussion about whether those two premises are true, whether it does actually make sense to say that we can have free will even if physical determinism is true. Opinions differed, but that is Frankfurt's argument. So a little philosophy chaser after the shot of politics that you got earlier.
Here's a reminder: just because you don't like the conclusion doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the argument.
There you go. We'll once we get merch, we'll put that in the t-shirts.